Good evening, friends. My name is Parag Shukl, and I head the Urja Foundation. It's a charitable trust which apparently works into rural development and rural electrification, one of the core areas that we look at. I'll try to keep this very short, and the reason being also I'm standing behind the long break that comes in, and you had a tough day today with all the information. I'm amazed with the reporter of information that has been expedited by all the knowledgeable people out here, but at the end of the day, what we find is that policies, technology, everything is great out here in India, but bottom line is we have majority of our villages lacking access to basic electricity, consistent electricity, and also in terms of necessities of life, we don't even need to go outside Mumbai. I mean, it's 1 hour drive from Mumbai, and you will have places which do not have access to even basic electricity. So the whole objective of what we are bringing in is, in terms of policy framework, this is fine, but at the same time, we need growth to be inclusive and not be exclusive. And also, it needs to be equitable, because resources are not meant only for the rich. This needs to trickle down to the last mile connectivity, and that's what we are bringing to the table. I'll just go through a brief presentation of ours, and we did a small research in terms of the policies of Government of India from 1947. And there are some key findings, and I'll be happy to share this with you. So here it is. Well, this is just a brief about Urja Foundation. What's our goal and missions and vision. As of today, we started in 2013. Prior to that, I was working with Professor Mohammad Yunus in Bangladesh, where they completed at least 1 million homes in 7 years. Now, for the size of Bangladesh, 1 million homes in 7 years, that's commendable. We wanted to replicate the same system out here in India, and we ended up doing more of power plants in solar. And with all this additional capacities of power plants in solar, we have found that a lot of times you have the power plants and just the villages next door don't even have basic access to electricity. So that's something that instigated us to start the foundation, wherein we cover this spectrum of people, remote areas, inaccessible terrain. Also, it's not just because of the government issues. There are practical issues also. In terms of if those areas are small and segregated, it just doesn't really make economic sense to put up the transmission lines and get them access to power. So those are issues out there. Of course, transmission distribution losses. One of the key areas that we looked at was decentralized power, microgrids, and standalone systems. Well, at Urja, we focus on energy. We started with energy, especially rural electrification, and then we moved on to water purification, because we also found that doing the work in the villages, we found that contamination of water is really high. There are areas where you get fantastic bottles of Coca-Cola and Pepsi, but you don't get access to clean drinking water, because your freshwater groundwater resources have been taken away by those companies. And there is an absolute dearth of that. So we did focus on that as well. With regards to research, I couldn't agree more with Dr. Bonde on that, because we need to bring in since this is an emerging technology in solar, we need to have more research out here in terms of getting the efficiencies higher. It started with 8%, currently hovering around 16%. Maybe Japanese companies giving it at around 25%, but we'll be happy to have more Indian companies and more Indian research bringing it to the fore, because that's the whole spectrum that we should look at. Rather than replicating the systems in the West, we need to customize it in our own context. So I would completely agree with Dr. Bonde on that. Well, we've been doing these projects. I mean, when I talked about doing a project, the first project we did was in Palghar, which was like an hour's drive from Mumbai, and I was quite surprised that, there's no access to power and in the tribal areas. And the funny thing is, we had some reporters coming in and asking us that, kab se power nahi hai, and it's not as if they had it at some point in time and they don't have it today. They didn't have it from the time they existed. And another project, the pet project that we are doing now is the Sanjay Gandhi National Park. there is an entire hamlet of tribals who are staying at Pathanwadi, just off in Malad East. There's around 500 homes. Now, those are the people who've been staying there for so many years, and you can actually see the Oberoi Mall from there. And those are the people who have no access to power in the heart of Mumbai. So, let alone India. I mean, we will talk about that at a later stage. But the first things first. So, great advancement in technology, great power plants, distribution for industries, great. Absolutely agree with that. But at the same time, we felt that this is also an important segment, that those are our own people who do not even have basic access. So we're starting with that as well. And well, a couple of things, key pointers that I wanted to share on is statistics on access to electricity. Consistent electricity is a huge challenge. We just did a project in UP in Gorakhpur, and there are villages who have the grid lines, but the access to power, the supply of power, they get power every 3 days. Now that is like every 72 hours they get power, and the power is only for 2 hours. So we actually put up a clean water drinking, a water RO purification plant, and it was a 3-phase one, 10 kilowatt. And then we found out that we need to have a stabilizer, or uske baad pata chala कि we need to also put up the solar power plant because there is no access to electricity. I mean, there's no consistent electricity. वो चलाएंगे कैसे? So we started with the small little things. It's a learning curve when you go down to the remote areas. It's fantastic to sit here in fancy rooms and draft all policies, but when you go down to the ground, you realize it's still way behind. I mean, they are more than happy, and those are the people. I'm not talking about people who want it for free. They really even want to pay for it. The replacement cost of kerosene, they are happy to pay for it. But the fact of the matter is nobody's even touched upon that. And in fact, NTPC, we did a project in Sonbhadra. This was in January, where there is a big NTPC plant, and which is in UP, 100 kilometers away from Varanasi. And 5,000 approximately homes without access to electricity, and you have a fantastic power plant just very nearby. Doesn't say much about our experience or our growth strategies that we are doing. So we need to have an inclusive policy with regards to those issues as well. Another key pointer that I want to make is with regards to the policy framework, we have this Rajiv Gandhi Vidyutikaran Gramin Yojana, apparently earmarked with 50,000 crores plus money, 20,000 crores utilized. I wouldn't know where, but yes, it's been utilized somewhere. And they mentioned about village electrification. Now, one of the key pointers that you need to do about village electrification is that you have a solar lamppost or some lamppost in village ke chaurahe pe laga diya, and the village is electrified. Well, yeah, now, so we need to change that to household electrification. The electrification needs to be in every home rather than on the village level. I mean, village level needs to be there, but at the same time, this needs to change to the household level. Well, rural electrification scenario in India, I mean, these are just some numbers that we did put up. Despite electrification, kerosene usage continues mostly for lighting, biomass, major source. I mean, we are still using those for cooking. So those are the challenges that we need to look at. As you rightly said, energy is just not about electricity. It's the whole paradigm of energy that we look at. And one of the key pointers that we feel is that we have enough resources in India in terms of human, in terms of technological issues, resources, in terms of financial also. All we need to do is consolidate this together, because as we were working in all the different areas of India, we find that in every state there are at least 50 NGOs working on the same subject. But everybody's trying to reinvent the wheel on their own. Nobody's trying to amalgate or talk to each other and find out what the learning curve is. So that's something that we need to look at. And also, I mean, there's seldom much interaction with the intellect capital that we have out here. So that would really bring about a lot of change in terms of our efficiency, in terms of deliveries. So we'll be happy to collaborate with the knowledge capital that we have here in the room and work together for common objectives. This is a very basic stuff that we do is like, to the areas where there are no lights, we actually provide them with basic home lighting systems, which consist of 2 lights or 3 lights, and they get a portable light, because even today, subah ka jo chula jalta hai, they actually go to the jungles and cut the wood and come back. So for sanitation also, they require the portable lights. A mobile charger, because the mobile penetration is high. How do you bring about the change in sociological terms is communication, so mobile charging stations. Another thing that we realized is, because for the clusters, what we do is we keep microgrids. Now, microgrids, this was essentially work for around 50 homes or 100 homes. Essentially, if they are cluttered in a specific area, key challenge would also be bandwidth control, because how do you regulate the control? Who's going to be using how much? And also, one of the pluses with microgrid is you can actually scale up the model, because the needs, initially when they didn't have light, they start with light. Later on, they want the fans. Later on, they want the laptops to work. Then later on, everything needs to work on that. So we need to keep those requirements and demand in mind when we are designing the system. So microgrids is, we have already done around 20 projects of these across India. And our finding is that people are really happy to work with this. One of the key issues is repayment, because this system, it's like pay as you go. You basically can have a refill of units on your mobile, and this would work. So because the IT-enabled services have become much more better, so our cost has reduced in terms of IT technological part. But still, in terms of migrating population, it becomes a bit difficult, because a lot of times you have people who are staying are actually migrating in seasonals to go down to cities in search of livelihood. So we need to factor those areas as well, when we are designing the systems out here. Solar photovoltaic panels is what we actually work with all the time, and we'll be happy to move in further. We do have the battery banks. One of the key issues is going to be the battery banks as we talk about solar capacities increasing in India in terms of huge power plants. Germany is facing the same issue. And trust me, battery banks don't come cheap. It's really, really power consuming. At the same time, it's expensive. And most importantly, at the end of the day, when you have this kind of battery banks, you're looking at losses in terms of storage and also reusing of the same. Well, this is what we do is village selection for setting up small microgrids, community engagement process. They are more than happy to work on that, village mapping and planning. Yes, the key factor with solar is, since solar is direct current, it's DC power, and what we're utilizing here is AC power. So we are also keeping in mind that at some point, government will electrify those villages. And what happens then to the solar power plants? So that is something that we are working on, where we can interface it, as Professor Dr. Bonde has mentioned, that we need it not to be exclusive, but we'll blend both the technologies together. So there'll be smart inverters and an interface with the grid that can work on. So it becomes much more easier. So whatever we are doing doesn't get absolute. Now, what are the challenges and suggestions that I would like to put forth is 100% household electrification in India. I think that's possible, because we are talking about huge numbers, but bottom line is we need 100% electrification. And this is possible in at least, I think if we really focus on that, in next 3 to 4 years, this should be possible. In fact, we are interacting with the government on that to say that possibly they can also leverage political mileage at the end of their tenure, that at least not a single home in India should be lacking electricity. Bottom line, of course, we'll talk about industries, we'll talk about growth, we'll talk about all the numbers, but at the same time, every home in India will have basic access to electricity. That's what the focus area is. On-grid, off-grid interface, we need to look at the future as well. So as and when we have the on-grid sites coming in, we need the interfaces to be done. So that's something that in terms of policy we need to look at. Revenue sustainability, yes, how sustainable are the solutions? We need to look at that as well. In our experience, there have been experiences where it really didn't work as well. But over a period of time, we have understood that people actually would love to pay if it's consistent power. And the farmers are more than happy to pay as well, because one of the key things, it's not here, we do put up solar water pumps, and it's been a huge success. And the farmers really like it. It's been effective, and they're willing to pay for it as well. Another thing is capacity building in terms of getting the microgrids capacity to be scaled up, because as and when we have done any of these microgrids, within 6 months or 8 months, we have to double the capacity, because the paving power is there, but we need to have the scalability as well, and the speed, because people are not really patient anymore now. I mean, they've been waiting for 60 years. They really want it fast. Decreasing the reliance on subsidies, I mean, I think, that's something that is, I firmly believe that any of the projects that we have been doing, we are not reliant on government subsidies. We need this project to be independent and sustainable on its own. It should have its own independent revenue scheme. Government is there to facilitate whatever it needs to, but as a social entrepreneur, I think we should not be reliant on subsidies. And most of the subsidies of the government in the energy sector goes into oil, I mean, quite a bit. With regards to diesel, and those have been hobnobbing by all the rich who've been driving all those fancy cars, and that's a criminal waste of money that goes out there. So that's something that we need to look at. And energy security, as we mentioned about energy security, very, very key important point. In fact, I was in LA as well at the University of Southern California, and we were talking about the energy security of a country, and when they asked about India, I mean, I had no answers on that, not reliable at least, or that would make a dent, where 40% of our coal-fired plant in super conditions, where the coal linkages and supply chain management needs to be re-looked at. I think I wouldn't paint a gloomy picture, but there are things that needs to be rectified. So yeah, India also needs to look at energy security in a very, very big way. Bottom line, a consolidation of resources and energy generation of all forms. I mean, basically, we need to look at all energy, all forms of generations of energy, be it coal, be it renewable energy, be it tidal, geothermal, wind. You talk about it, waste to energy. I mean, that's, I think, is the future further up. But consistency of the waste and the calorific value of the waste, because one of the key issues with waste is we don't segregate it. Those are, we call it dumping grounds. In the West, they call it collection centers. So there's a major difference there. So that's something that we need to relook at. Effective utilization of the generated power, I think that really needs to be evaluated. Smart grids, cutting down on your T&D losses. And also, with regards to energy efficiency, a couple of key factors that we do is, like in India, I mean, it was in the past that we had most of the grid failure rate was really, really high. Now it is coming down, which is much better, but it could be much better as well. I mean, we can do much better in those areas as well. And bottom line, I would like to leave with this, is development and growth needs to be equitable and inclusive for a better India. That's all I need to say on that. And if you do have any questions, I'll be happy to shoot on that. And thank you so very much, Professor Karhade, for having me here. And I've been an alumni of the same college, so it just feels good to be back in the college as well. Thank you.